unforgettable. It's a great word because everything he's done, he's left his mark at every place he's been and everybody he's met. I think he's touched them and left something special with everybody. He was just that type of guy.
He never tried to put himself up on a pedestal or anything like that.
He just loved life. He loved life. And he lived life completely, like 100%.
He was always full of enthusiasm. You could be having the worst day in the world and Possum was the guy that would make you smile about it.
He was the type of guy that you couldn't get cross with because it wouldn't have worked anyway. He would have just laughed at you.
This is the boy that never grew up but managed to do what he wanted to do in life.
He was never, to us, Possum Bourne, the rally driver. He was always our brother.
Peter. From an early age, he always liked anything that moved, had wheels, and one of his greatest collections was his Matchbox toys.
He was so interested in wheels and things like that. His Matchbox toys were taboo and you just didn't take them because then you would be in trouble. He'd be chasing you around.
As he grew older, he wasn't that keen on other sports. He played a little bit of rugby, but he was more interested in things with wheels. He'd rather stay home, drive the tractor.
Ray and Peggy Bourne raised 4 children on their farm near Merrimeri, south of Auckland. Peter, on the left, was second oldest. Brother Neville had died when Peter was still a baby. Younger brother Jeff came next, then sister Deb, now living in England, then Christine, the youngest. Their brother's love of wheels always suggested a career in cars.
When he was at high school, he knew he'd have to have a mechanic's apprenticeship, if he wanted to drive. He'd go up to the high school, go up to the Howe and Westons, it was, every Wednesday to ask how many how many apprentices they were going to take. And the chap there said, "Look, Peter, if persistence is anything, you'll be there."
I had this burning desire that that's what I wanted to be involved with motor industry of some sort. So I managed to get a job. Off I went.
Up until now, he was still Peter to his family, Peter to his mates. But a marsupial on the road was about to change the name that the world would come to know.
Well, it was just after he started work, really, and I had a little Humber 80 car that he used to go to work.
And I was driving home from night school, probably either the first or second time at night on my own, and a possum ran out in front of me about 50 metres from our gate on a gravel road. So, when you're 15, you know everything, don't you? You know how to drive, you know how to tell your old man what to do, everything. So anyway, I swerved to avoid this possum, lose it, spins around, hits the bank, rolls over, writes the car off.
Ray and I were sitting in the lounge and I heard the door and I heard Peter and I said to Ray, "That's Peter," but I didn't hear the car.
After a lengthy discussion with Mum and Dad at home, I went to work the next day and one of the guys there says, "We'll have to call you Possum." And from that moment on, bang, that's been my name.
Possum was soon racing souped-up cars at Pukekohe Car Club meets, but then a shot at rallying opened up a whole new world to him.
He co-drove for me in the first rally I ever did, and it was the first event or rally that Possum ever done as my co-driver. I still remember the event. It was in the Waiaki Forest in Waiora there, and Possum was full of guiding me through all the time. The faster I went, the more he liked it. But I remember this particular coming down this hill at high speed, and I started getting on the brakes because it looked a bit tricky, and "No, go," says Possum. "It's straight, it's just a slight kink." So I got back on the gas, we come round the corner on half a wheel into the water table, ripped bits off the car and missed the trees, zigzagged down the road, and I'm thinking, I sort of looked across at Possum to where am I going to punch him, and he's got this big smile on his face and he goes, "Shit hot." So what could you do?
Next time out, Possum had a drive and he was hooked. He bought a Cortina V8 and spent every spare cent making it go faster.
That was probably the biggest thing in the early days, was the sacrifices that he would have made, like I would have made, to have followed your dream. No real home life, every weekend in the garage, and if you weren't there during the week, you were trying to work and earn some money.
He borrowed probably everything. When he built up the Cortina, everything he had went into the rallying.
The sport was costing Possum thousands, and as a tanker driver, he wasn't earning a fortune. Sponsors were hard to find in the early days, and it took a while to get his dad on side too.
When Peter started rallying, Ray thought, goodness, all that money just on sport.
I think Possum actually even had to forge his signature because in those days you had to be, I think, 20 before you were allowed to race, unless you had parents' consent. But as time went on, his father got right into it and backed him right to the end, yes, absolutely.
You know, he could see what a pleasure it was for Peter, what enjoyment. He was his biggest fan. You know, we went to every rally that as it started, and if he was still in at the finish, we were at the end of it, you know, and he was really enthusiastic about it in the finish.
Possum spent every spare moment either racing or working on his cars. He did find time for girlfriends along the way, but even they had to take a back seat to motorsport.
If he had a date to go on and the car wasn't ready, well, you know, the date would get forgotten about.
This particular night, Possum, he was supposed to go to, I think it was a wedding dance or something like that. Anyway, he was supposed to pick his girlfriend Robin up at the time. I think it's something like 8 o'clock, and this was about 11 o'clock, and he goes, shit, I was supposed to pick up Robin at 8 o'clock. And then he just carried on talking as though nothing, you know, it was too late, don't worry about it. But that was Possum's style.
He was fairly forgivable, wasn't he?
Yeah, was that smile I guess he had.
I guess one of his biggest highlights would have been with the V8 Cortina in the Woodhall Forest, you know, going out and getting third place in one of his first major rallies.
So we got seeded 61 and off we went and we came third. Past God knows how many cars and dust and God knows what else, but about halfway through, it was real pivotal because halfway through that rally, once the tenseness went and you started to relax and enjoy the driving and get on with it, I thought to myself, hey, this is what I want to do. I've found what I want to do.
There was no professional drivers in New Zealand in those days. It's, you know, there was drivers that had cars provided for them, but they didn't really earn a wage.
He believed that one day he would be paid to drive. He told me this, and I said to him at the time, not even Rod Millen gets that privilege, and he was the man that we were all trying to beat at the time.
You know, as time went on, he says, I'm going to be a champion. You know, and he had his sights set very early on in the life. And this, we're talking probably in the late 70s, early 80s, when he decided he was going to be a champion.
It was when he told stories, which is probably like, as his friends, probably a thing they would remember about him, like, you had to be you didn't want to do it in your lounge on your carpet unless you cleared the tables, because when Possum told a story, I mean, he lived it. Like, gear changes, you know.
Didn't matter when he had a beer in his hand, it would be
even his feet would be going, you know. and 9 times out of 10, if you're close to a table, he'd always knock something over. But yeah, when he told a story, he really relived it. I guess it just came with his enthusiasm, mate.
By 1983, Possum was fast making a name for himself in his Mazda RX-3. But overseas, four-wheel drive was just coming into its own, and Possum wanted to try one. When he spotted a new Subaru at the local Pukekohe dealers, he went straight to the owner, Don Thompson.
He came and saw Don and asked Don about these four-wheel drive Subarus, and Don says, well, I'll give the man at Motor Holdings a call and see what he thinks. So Don made the phone call through to Motor Holdings, who was the distributor in those days, and the late Jeff Cousins was the sales marketing manager, I believe, in those back then, and they were chatting away about being involved in motorsport, and Jeff said, well, yeah, we are actually thinking about getting a little bit involved in motorsport, but we'd only be interested if we could get hold of that guy called Possum Bourne to drive a car for us. And well, Don says, well, Jeff, he's actually sitting on the other side of the desk of mine asking about a Subaru. So that's when the association started.
Well, I can still remember the day that we were sitting around the smuggo table at work and somebody said, Possum's got himself a car for the International. And it's a Subaru, and it was like 1600cc. I don't know how much power it had, but it probably wouldn't have got out of its own way. And we thought, how could he drive something like this?
To go from a flame-spitting Mazda that showered everyone in stones to a sedate four-wheel drive car that we were virtually a laughing stock. People said, what do you want to do this for? You know, you had a Mazda.
There was a lot of mistakes made. Probably The amount of power the engine made after it was built was probably one of the worst factors of going into the international that year, because I think our utes could go faster than the rally car. We could actually pass the rally car on the road.
Despite its obvious lack of power, the four-wheel drive had outstanding grip and reliability. In the 1983 Rally of New Zealand, much to his new sponsor's delight, Possum came home first in the Group A class for production cars.
Maybe he had the last laugh there, really, because it just led into, led him to where he was in the middle 80s.
Subaru lifted New Zealand's sales 25% in Possum's first year. It was a great start to a relationship that would span the next 2 decades.
The Japanese are very loyal and reward people with their loyalty, and Possum was also very loyal to them. And you have to say that he did a fantastic job in this country and also in Australia to give that brand its awareness. And Subaru are where they are today through rallying. And you have to say that Possum was a major part of that success, certainly in those early days.
The Japs adored Possum, and he spent a lot of years with them. There's not a lot of guys who the Japs will hand out money to. They would normally send it over to Europe or something like that, but Possum was their main guy.
Even with sponsors behind him, money was still tight, but there was always a band of friends ready to give him a hand.
He never got anyone right from the early days. I guess that's why everybody helped him, because you never ever felt you were being used. It was always a big team thing.
And to be a part of a team with Possum, it was something else, People sort of looked at you and said, crikey, I want to be in that team. And that's what we loved about it, It's something that not everyone had, but we were a part of it.
By the mid-80s, Possum was ready to give up his day job, turn pro, and set up a small rally team.
He was working out of a shed at home, and he had one guy he had employed for him. And then it just went from there, and the rest of us used to just rally around at nights and work on the car as well, because one person couldn't really do it. And so that was the start of, I guess, Possum Bourne Motorsport.
Possum's local success led to bigger things. In 1986, Subaru offered him a factory car to drive in the notorious East African Safari.
The biggest step was for these 3 Kiwis that had never been out of the country, and for Possum to be offered basically a works drive with a factory team in one of the events that's the most gruelling rally of the whole championship. The East African Safari was by far the toughest and roughest rally. Just to get to the end was an amazing feat.
Like something can walk in front of you in Kenya and that's your rally gone. You just can't count against nature mucking up your whole event. The roads never close for the rally. That's why it's such an adventure.
The locals there, they all get to a corner and they love seeing action, so they'll dig a big trench across the road and hopefully your car hits it and rolls over,
He was really proud to go over and do Kenya. That was just a massive event. I think he crashed in there, which was pretty normal, not for Possum, but for in Kenya not to finish. It was a very hard thing to finish.
And the speed that he was showing in the stages was, a lot of people taking notice of him from higher above, basically. The Japanese were very impressed with the speed that he could get out of the Subaru.
A breakdown forced Bourne out of that first East African Safari, but he'd done well enough for Subaru to invite him back again the next year. Possum's long absence put further strain on his marriage to first wife Lynn. A year later, after his second trip to Kenya, they separated. That second safari did not go well for Possum, at least on the road. Dogged by breakdowns, he finished 11th. In his own words, a dismal result. But it wasn't all bad. At one of the service stops, he met someone who would change his life.
I'm actually a very, sort of skeptic at love at first sight type thing, but that was love at first sight because we didn't really have a dating. We never really dated, for that matter. We only had a couple of weeks really together before I came to New Zealand. And from the moment I landed in New Zealand, it was just full on. So, there was never, never that doubt or question. It was always going to happen. Yeah.
The safari was the biggest thing in Kenya every year, and like other teams, Subaru relied on locals to keep them fed and watered.
Yeah, I'd volunteered to help on the rally. A friend of mine asked if I wanted to be a part of the team. So, no, I had no idea that Possum was on there, or that there was a New Zealander on the team.
I pulled up at a service halt at a little place just below the Mount Kilimanjaro at a place called Loitukitok.
It was beautiful, crisp, clear morning, And of course, they'd been driving for like 3 or 4 hours. So when he got out of the car, he was all hot and sweaty.
This nice girl came along and said, "Are you thirsty? I've got some water." And that was the first time I remember seeing her anyway.
He only had a few minutes, obviously, before he had to get back in the car and drive off. But that was the first moment, and I just went, yeah, definitely. It was until the prize giving. And so I waited for the opportunity to go up and talk to him at prize giving and didn't know what to say, so I just landed a line on him and said, do you dance as good as you drive? And he was like, yeah, we'll give it a shot. And that was it, he was mine.
But not right away. It was another year before Possum returned to Kenya. They met up again, and this time it was for keeps.
Everything clicked. The bones rattled and things, and that was the start of it.
When we first talked about, actually getting together, which was very soon after we met, he did lay down the law in one sense. He said, listen, rallying is my life, and, if you want to be with me, you have to accept rallying as part and parcel of our lives together. And I had no problem with that. I was like, if I love you, and if rallying is a part of you, then I'm going to love rallying too. I mean, I enjoyed going on the events because he would share his experience with me almost as much as he could without me physically being in the car.
I know Peggy's brother-in-law made a trip sometime later via New Zealand just to check him out, to make sure he was all right, to report back to Peg's mum and dad and the grandmother and all the relatives to make sure, he wasn't an ex-murderer or something like that, she was actually quite safe.
Peg was able to share Possum's dream of doing well in rallying and was really there to support him, and she did a great job of supporting him because it was quite a financial burden on themselves to get Possum to where he was and a lot of the events, and they scrimped and scraped, and the love she showed for Possum and how committed they were for Possum to succeed was just, and that's Peggy and Possum together, it's just a team.
She met him as a rally driver and knew him as Possum, and it just carried on from there. And when they got married, she married Peter Possum Bourne.
Yes, she asked me did I mind if she married him as Possum, because that's how she'd met him. And I said, you do whatever you like, as long as it's legal.
So Peggy and Possum got married. It was Pukekohe 1991. Rally people came from all over to wish them well. Before long, they were thinking about starting a family.
Yeah, it didn't happen right away, and okay, there's obviously something, there's something wrong here. And so we went and sort of had some tests and found out that I wasn't really able to have them. And so we started in on the IVF programs.
Yeah, that was a real rough time for both of them. I think for Peggy especially, she was having to go on all these hormone treatments, obviously with IVF.
There were quite a few times, up to over 20 times where you're told, no, you're not pregnant after everything you've been through. So you actually get to the point where it's, I became quite obsessed about it, but it was quite depressing, and it was sort of dragging us down. We said, okay, we'll have a break, we'll have one last go, and if that doesn't work, well, Possum said, we're going to have a hell of a life together because, we're just going to do everything. And he always said, which was one of the most beautiful things he said to me, is, I never married you to have children. I married you because I love you, and we have a lot of fun together, and we enjoy the rallying, and we have a great life. And so we decided one more attempt.
And when they decided they'd only have one egg, and they picked the one that they'd called Taylor, and that's the one that came through. Just before Taylor was due, about a fortnight, the baby got into distress, so she had to have a cesarean, and he swallowed meconium, and he had to fight for his life. I mean, after all that, I said, God wouldn't be so cruel for Taylor to die now after all that.
Mummy's better at this, isn't she? Yeah. Let's hope we stick me and not you.
And so they just thought, well, they'd try for another one, but they lost. I think she got pregnant 3 or 4 times, the same thing happened, so they decided they'd give up.
But then, I was doing a rally in Canberra, actually, and doing the reconnaissance, and the phone rings, and Peg's on the other end, and she says, bawling her eyes out at the medical centre, and I thought, oh my God, what's happened to Taylor? And she says, no, I'm pregnant. And the doctor, she was bawling her eyes out, the pair of them sitting on the floor.
And this was Spencer. So, and he'd arrived just naturally. And then after Spencer was born, it was quite funny. They were all laughing and joking afterwards, and The specialist said, oh, I suppose after this we'll have to think about contraception, won't we? And they all laughed their heads off. 14 months later, Jaslyn arrived.
And Possum used to always joke that, we had to pay all this money going through all the IVF to end up with Taylor, and then he was going to have to pay money to stop. But those two surprises were definitely, dessert.
A lot of people look and say, hey, it must be fantastic to be able to travel and that. And it is, I'm doing what I want to do, my sport and that. But you dream about being at home, sitting on the couch, dinner on your knees, home-cooked meal, with kids crawling all over you. You crave it.
Daddy told me how to ride a bike with no training wheels, but I can do it now. He used to take me out to the motorbike track. Yeah. Daddy used to watch me jump on the trampoline.
And it can't have been easy for Peggy. I mean, I remember Possum telling me 1 month alone he was away for 28 days of the month. And I mean, he adored Peggy and the children. It must have been very hard for Possum to be away that length of time. They kept in contact by phone, obviously, but there was a lot of sacrifice with rallying.
I mean, he called every single day he was away and talked to each one of the children, and asked them, what they did.
And he said good night to me.
Yeah.
Good night. And then he said, Daddy loves you. And then he said, don't let the big bugs bite. Yeah, don't let the big bugs to bite.
When the boys started at the local school, Possum made a real effort to get involved, because by now he was doing almost all of his driving outside New Zealand.
He always tried to work his schedule around, or I should not his work his schedule around, is find out when he was free, when he was home. And then that's when he would sign up to do the things for like sausage sizzle at school.
Everyone knew who he was, but who he was for us was a dad first. When we'd go out on a day outing, he'd cause a lot of distraction. It was part of having Possum as a dad. We'd know that there'd be kids coming up to us for autographs when we were supposedly going somewhere. It was quite uncanny. On several occasions, we did have overnight camps and away camps, and he was able to come.
There's this one where he went on school camp with me, and we went to this place where it had bunks. I was at the top bunk, he was at the bottom, and we walked to this water slide. You got to swim and climb back up the ladder. It was fun. Dad went in his togs too, and there was a big splash.
Each of the children have a quality of Possum. I mean, Jazzy's got the spirit of Possum, Taylor's got the honest thinking of Possum. He's very genuine and he's very sincere, cares very much. And Spencer is normally quiet and reserved, but he's competitive. He's got Possum's competitive nature. So between the three of them, I mean, I see Possum all the time. It's just, he did obviously rub off on them, that's for sure.
It's pretty impossible to get involved with Possum without becoming personally involved, because he sort of he enters your life. He used to come over and we'd talk business, and he would stay with us. And I've never ever seen anyone apart from Possum arrive for a one-night stay with about 5 or 6 bags and suitcases. Everyone's got a story of an exploding suitcase that Possum would open and things would bounce out and fall over the place.
You walk into the room and you think, oh my God, he's only been there 5 minutes. And he could make such a big mess so quickly.
Another time to steer clear of him was when you had to check out of the hotel and get to the airport with about half an hour to spare. And you walk to his room and say you've got to drop off something to him in his bedroom, and he hasn't started to pack yet. He's on the phone and he's walking around picking up things to try and throw them in the suitcase, and there's just...
Australia was fast becoming a happy hunting ground for Possum. His shoestring private entry finished 4th behind the big overseas drivers in the 1990 round of the World Rally Championship. That result convinced Subaru Australia that Possum should be driving for them.
Why Possum? Well, the simple reason is we wanted the best. And we don't go rallying to come second. We go rallying to win. And to do that, you need the best, and Possum was quite simply the best.
He was obviously someone who presented himself very well to Subaru. He was very interested in coming across here and doing the series. And as it turned out, it was an incredibly wise choice.
Possum's international career was forging ahead. But back home, his father, Ray, always a tower of strength, was battling serious illness.
Peter always felt that Dad could do anything. Nothing could beat Dad. Dad would always fix it. And when he got sick and when he got cancer, Peter just couldn't believe that something like that could beat Dad. He found it quite difficult to come and see Ray all the time because he couldn't believe that, something like that could beat it. Dad could always, fix things.
And once his dad was gone, he said he felt incredibly alone because all of a sudden he was the oldest boy in the family, and he therefore took on that mantle. And he really, really missed his dad.
In '92, engine failure denied Possum a placing in the Rally of New Zealand, but he drove so well he was invited to compete in the Asia Pacific Championship. His car would be prepared by ProDrive, the Subaru Works rally team.
Things were on the up because, he'd finally got a drive with a factory team that was based in Europe. All he had to do was basically turn up, test the car, do the pace notes for the rally, and then drive in the event.
'93 was a busy year for Possum, now contesting Asia Pacific events in addition to the Australian Rally Championship.
We have 350 metres to a mud hole, keep right maybe.
It was also a year that highlighted a key relationship in any rally team, the one between driver and co-driver. In Possum's case, his co-drivers became great mates and trusted friends.
Jumps, 50 rough jumps.
The relationship in rallying between the co-driver and a driver is, Ari Vartanen once explained it was the most important relationship in your life, possibly besides your marriage.
Blind 4-5 left.
Like you're sitting there in a pace noted rally and you're putting your life in the co-driver's hands, and the co-driver is putting their life in your hands. So it's a trust situation.
When you're a co-driver in a rally car, is a bit like an onboard secretary. You take care of everything else peripheral and the rally and everything, and the driver's just got to think about driving the car fast and not bending it most of the time.
Long 5-6 right, opens 40, turn 3-4 left.
I thought I was a useless co-driver. Possum actually thought I was actually all right at it. He could never understand how I could sit there and read these corners out, because you literally had your head down and you had thousands and thousands of descriptions, and I could never figure out how he could possibly take it all in.
There's no one better to work with. Like, I've been in rallying for a bit over 20 years and been with a lot of really good top drivers, and Possum was easily the best. I felt like just doing the rallies and being Possum's co-driver, I felt like I'd made it to the top.
In the early 90s, Possum's co-driver was Roger Freeth. They were a formidable team, both on and off the road.
You've got two completely different people. You've got Possum, the rugged Pukekohe guy from way out in the Wop-Wops, and you've got Rog, who had a brain and a mind like a scientist, really. He was very, very intelligent, but he was also very funny. They worked just amazingly as a team, yeah.
150 right, 8 over the crest, 50. Can we keep it on the road? You want me to drive? Left 8 over the crest, 60.
I'm just checking if you're awake.
Thanks very much. Left 8, 70.
We get along reasonably well, and I think that's probably one of the most important things. If you spend days in Africa, weeks in a car with somebody, you've got to get along with them. If you don't, you're wasting your time, even if they are good at their job.
How many people earn their living at doing something they enjoy? And I think I'm one of the lucky ones that do that. And Roger is of the same opinion.
The Mad Doctor and the Marsupial, it was just what a combination. But they hit it off really well, and Possum always said that he was one of the best co-drivers he ever had, yeah.
In 1993, they were on their way to win Asia Pacific, which was fantastic. That was the biggest break for both of them as rally drivers and co-drivers. And 93 was going to be their year, really.
But in the third stage of the Rally of Australia, the car smashed into a roadside gum tree. Possum was unhurt, but his co-driver and great mate suffered critical injuries.
I think I was a few cars behind him on the road, and I remember going past a crashed car and thinking, far out, that's, you know, a big accident and incredibly bad.
I was waiting at the end of the stage, and of course we're just sitting there in the truck making sure he comes out.
And they didn't come through, and we got a call at about 2 o'clock to say they had an accident.
Nobody in the crew then was aware of how critical Roger's condition was then, and he was obviously airlifted to hospital.
I believed he had cracked ribs, and I remember bawling in the car because I'm not good when other people hurt themselves, and I thought, oh my God, that must really hurt. So yeah, we drove back to Perth, but unfortunately in that time Roger died already, so yeah, that was very hard.
That was terrible. That was such a terrible loss for him too, because apart from being his co-driver, he was his best friend. They were such mates.
He really struggled with that because it was something that was out of his control, and something he couldn't fix and make everyone happy, because Possum was really much into making things right for everyone.
It wasn't his fault.
It's just such a rarity in our sport that it's a shock to everyone, and and it's like a big family, and it affects the whole family, and it's certainly something that you don't like in the sport.
He never left my side, actually. He was so protective. He didn't leave. We were together, actually, me, Possum and Peggy, from the time Roger died until we got here.
Possum and Peggy continued to stand by Roger's widow and son from that time on.
He made Roger a promise and he kept it. He was there from day one, and he was there to the day he died, supporting Stefan and myself.
Well, after Roger died as a result of that accident, the next event they were supposed to do was the Hong Kong to Beijing rally about a month later. Might have been 5 or 6 weeks. And I know that the Japanese weren't too keen for him to do the rally.
Japanese protocol says that I should really wait for 49 days. It's not a religious thing, it's something that's done over there.
He, along with Bev Freeth, basically, pleaded with the Japanese, please let us continue, because that's what Roger would have wanted. And he still wanted to try and win the championship, which he did. Tony Serkin became his co-driver for the next sort of 2.5 seasons, and they got enough good results in Hong Kong, Beijing, and then the Thailand rally that year to take the Asia Pacific Championship.
After that, I never saw Possum's performances affected, and I think that's a tribute to him, how he did cope with it.
Roger's given the ultimate sacrifice to his career and mine. Now, what point would there be in stopping to not see it through and see how far you could get? If I'm having a bad day and I'm sitting at the car at the start there, and if it's not going well, come on, Rog, mate, I need a hand here. I use it as motivation, focus, call it what you like, but it works. And every car that I've owned or I've been allowed to has the number plate ROJ, which is how Rog used to sign his name.
Possum dedicated his first Asia Pacific Championship to his late co-driver. He took overall honours again the following year, but after poor results in '95, he was dropped from the Pro Drive team.
Possum, because he didn't probably get quite enough miles, struggled to be on the pace. And of course, when you got World Championship guys who are competing Asia Pacific, they're doing 7 other events coming there, they're really hot. And Possum was striving to keep up with them.
He says, well, maybe that's it for me. Maybe I should retire. And I was like, no way. You're not ready to retire. You still have this love and this passion for it. It's no good to me if you're going to be at home and not happy and miserable because you weren't ready to stop. So I said, you take whatever it is we've got, and let's buy this rally car, because there was a rally car for sale.
He found the funds. He bought the car that he competed in the last event that he did in Thailand, and put together a championship in Australia. Spoke to Nick Senior at Subaru Australia, and that was the start of our 7-year dominance in the Australian Rally Championship, just through Possum's efforts. So never say die. I'm not going to give up. I'm going to do something else, and he did.
He drove, or has driven, better since that moment than ever before. He loved being able to say that he did it with his team from New Zealand.
Really trying to alter something right up to the very last moment before that first stage. You'd be a bit worried. You think he's a bit off colour that day.
Every now and again, he'd come out and say, the car's perfect, don't touch, no. In those sort of situations, we would win by minutes.
In '96, Possum returned to the Australian Rally Championship with his own team, with a car that cost him $500,000 and with backing from Subaru Australia. They missed the first event altogether, so the heat was on for Possum Bourne Motorsport to deliver in the remaining events.
The funding probably was marginal. He was up against some pretty hot competition, but Possum drove very, very well, realising that he had to basically win every event, but more importantly had to finish every event. There was no DNFs.
The first event we did was Rally Melbourne, and
we annihilated them.
Yeah, we had a 3-minute lead after I think the first day, and I think their mouths were hanging open. Yeah. So it was a good feeling.
They didn't see which way we'd come. They didn't believe that we would have this pace, and I mean, it was awesome. We just went there and we just blew them away.
And then we did it the following year, and then the following year.
But a lot of that came from Possum's experience at the World Championship level. You know, he brought that to Australia, and he was a step above everyone else, really.
Possum's first overall win in the '96 Australian Series was testimony to the many skills he had developed, way beyond simply driving the car.
Possum Bourne had to get the money together, build the car, do all the deals with the sponsors, and still have your mind clear enough to get in the car on rally day and go out there and win. It was, I think, that's one of the true successes of Possum, is that he was just so much more than a rally driver. He was a businessman, he was a marketer, you know, an incredible marketer to put that program together.
Possum went on to dominate the Australian Championship, winning a record 6 titles in a row before the rules changed in 2002. Now the series would be restricted to Group N production cars, slower than the World Rally Championship cars Possum's team had been campaigning.
Possum, as well as myself, were actually probably against those rules initially, because we had these fantastic World Rally cars that were such fun to drive, and we didn't want to give up that opportunity. But the reality was that World Rally cars in this country were just too expensive, and the rules had to change.
A lot of people believed that the reason Possum was so good because he had a World Rally car. If I had a World Rally car, I could be this good as well. He went back down to a production car, which is something that requires a totally different style and adjustment to drive even.
At the first event, and there's only 7 of them, he had a DNF on both days, so he came out of the first round with absolutely no points.
And people thought, oh, hello, he's back down to where we are all running now. Welcome to the real world, Possum. We'll show you how it's done.
You know, everyone started to write him off, and of course, if there was anything that Possum loved, it was a challenge, and when it really got to him.
Short 6 left, 60.
We were confident we could do okay, even though we'd got behind the 8 ball a bit by getting no points, and went on and virtually won every event after that, for the rest of the year. So, I mean, both of us had the attitude that we're only here to win and we're going to do that.
His persistence would always pay off, and particularly in a rally sense, when you're sort of almost down and out in a rally, Possum has got flat tyres and Stacey's sitting there going, what are we going to do? And Possum somehow works out how to get to the car to the end of the stage and then manages to pick up time and ends up winning the rally or something. It's quite amazing to see.
I never doubted we would win it. How's that? Amazing, I mean, it was his attitude, his just infectious, and that's what makes us want to do it, I think.
It's a tribute to the team that never said die, that at the start of the year when it was all not going well and the cars were out of development and not fast enough, everybody didn't give us a chance. But if you keep fighting, you keep plugging away, you get a bit each time, amazing what will happen.
I like winning any time, but winning with Possum was just always so good. Like he's always smiling anyway. You see any photo of him, like he's really not smiling, but the beam when we win is just unbelievable.
Having amply demonstrated his skills in Group N, Possum persuaded Subaru to take on the European manufacturers and enter a team in the production class of the World Rally Championship.
After the pro drive years in the early 90s, Possum never gave up hope that he would be back in the factory car. And when the production World Rally Championship came up, that was the ideal fit for him. And he worked so hard and to get the support from the factory, and he put the sponsors and the team together.
A whole new world had opened up for Possum, and finally a chance to confirm his reputation on the international scene.
He was so excited. It was everything he ever dreamed of, and this was going to be his year, and he was so excited. He's just like a little kid that just gets, a toy for the first time.
This was his own baby to go and do the Group N production World Championship, and I just know how excited he was. There is absolutely no doubt in my mind that he would have won the production Group N World Championship. It was the best. I mean, whether we'd win or not or whatever, but to compete, to experience, it felt like we'd made it. That was it. We were part of the World Championship.
Yeah, I think he would have won the World Rally Championship. He was an incredible competitor. Had a great passion for what he was doing.
After the New Zealand round of the 2003 World Championship, Possum was preparing for a hill climb near Wanaka when he was seriously injured in a road accident. He died 12 days later.
No one wins 7 championships in a row and is forgotten. No one comes into people's lives like Possum did and is forgotten.
He will be incredibly sadly missed from so many aspects of the sport in this country, for his character, for his input into the sport, for his professionalism in trying to raise the standard of the sport all the time, and it makes you tired thinking about it. Like, his enthusiasm and push for everything he did was incredible.
I think we miss 10 o'clock every morning. Possum used to come in before he went to his office up the road. He'd come in here at 10 o'clock and he'd swan in.
That's only because he just got out of bed.
Yeah, true. But he'd swan in and he would talk to all of the staff, but he'd just draw them in. And it was terrible from my point of view, trying to get people to do work. And for half an hour, everyone stops work and chat with Possum. But I mean, that was fantastic. He just had that way with the staff but with everyone. He was such a great guy to work with. He was your boss, but he was your mate.
I think if anyone asked me what my life was like with Possum, I would liken my life with Possum to that of a rally car, because a rally car is fast, it's exciting, it's scary, it's sideways, it's stand on it, it's out wide, cut the corner, but it always ended up with aiming for the podium. It's like, it was just, that was my life with Possum. A rally car.